deep compassion. That's one of the things I think incarceration does for people that are at least able to be mindful of that, is they say, hey, like I've caused other people a lot of pain. I'm in here feeling a lot of pain because of how separated I am from my loved ones in society. I don't want anybody else to have to experience this kind of pain. I don't ever want to inflict that kind of pain on somebody else. And it's really that, just that sense of compassion that I think morality can be built off of. And then, if somebody wants to, in addition to that, say, and I believe, that God wants us to live this way. I believe that when Jesus talked about serving the poor and the orphans and visiting people in prisons, I think he was talking about the outcasts of society and helping them. And like those kinds of principles are really beautiful once you also understand your own individual suffering and pain process and how that should really be the driving force.
Yes, and we all have a different process too.
Yeah,
and especially when you're. And for people that don't know, you're not dabbing and being a Christian. You, like as you said, you studied it.
Yeah,
and then you have this whole new, like you have a very wide perspective, and that's also like again like late 20s, really that's a hard age. And then when your whole basically maybe like you could say like your whole foundation is like, well, who am I now? If I don't believe this, and then you have a record called Awaken.
Yeah,
it's like that's a struggle, man. And I could only assume that it just makes you feel very alone. And then when you're in a band, trying to explain this, when the only few people in your life that start to do this, it sounds like you're just making a record, but when that happens, it's happened to me. You feel very alone.
Yeah,
and you do go to pretty dark places, which I personally have. Because your whole, especially if you're dealing with like abandonment issues, when your band goes like this, it's not you go into other things. And it sounds like you were struggling with finding spirituality after this doing the studying of being a Christian, and then now you're as you said you start doing things in an unhealthy way. For you seem to really pick up bodybuilding. And me being outside, I'm like, dude, Tim's getting big. Like, I could tell.
Yeah.
Like it turns into like a addiction, and then you don't have your fucking foundation. You don't have your spiritual foundation, and then you don't have your band foundation, which is even just as strong as being spiritual, because you're bounded by music and your soul. So I can only imagine, like, where did your... So obviously you're in bodybuilding, you're trying to figure out who you are. Like, where was your mind at, Tim? Where like, like you're going to the gym, like you barely put out this fucking record, which I know how that is.
Yeah.
and then to you being incarcerated, like what was your thought process like?
There's a lot of different eras there. So, leading up to my incarceration, when my world sort of fell apart, like, you have this person you talk to every day, some people say it's God, another religion might have a different name for it, whatever. And somebody, you wake up and you spend however many minutes or hours in the morning talking to this person, and all of a sudden this person is not a part of your life anymore. So you like lost your little like best friend, and then I've also lost that deep connection with my bandmates, and I went through a divorce, and everything was changing in my life, and what I didn't know what was really important to me at that time, but I think, and some of this stuff I'm not even really able to technically talk about, so I'll just say it in these terms, that for any person let's just say a person is a father, and they're confused about what really matters to them in life, it becomes obvious to them that everything else in their life can change, but being a father is still, their identity is still what's most important to them. And so a father's relationship with his children, if everything else in his life changes and goes away, that's the one thing he wants to protect above all things. And so my mindset was, I don't care what changes or goes differently in my life, but I want to maintain what's most important to me, and almost like the singular fixation on what was most important to me, regardless of how that affected anything else in the world.
Yeah.
I know it's a little bit vague, but that's the best I can really talk about it.
Yeah. And then obviously fast forward, shit like all we have as outsiders is what we see on TV.
Yeah.
You're like the person that we least expected. I've shared a bus with you in all over Europe, damn near across the ocean and world. You know, I know who you are, Tim, and I had great moments with you. So I'm sitting back with my parents. I'm watching national television. There's Tim, and depending on, obviously, no matter, only you fucking know what exactly would happen in like a very tight circle. But when you're an outsider, there is different mindsets that you could approach. That is, you know, okay, he fucked up, or, you know, what's wrong with Tim?
Yeah.
You know, I saw, I just saw like a dude in his early 30s, and he was broken for all the reasons that you just pretty much laid out on the table very, very, very clearly. And people could go listen to this whole thing again. Listen, I mean, it's very clear. You were very alone. And we're an outsider. I'm like, man, what happened to Tim? Like holy shit. But I knew who you were just based on the time I spent with you. You know, I've had a long thought process before this conversation. Exactly what I think of you, which is why, you know, we're talking. And that was like, what was, like, Tim, like, what was that like, man? I mean, I never been incarcerated. What was that like for you?
Yeah. I mean, I think that my thinking was so isolated into my own mind and like disconnected from my support system that I didn't really even fathom or realize how much I had lost myself and who the core of who I really was. Like, you know, it's like I was this one person for most of my life, and then for this period of time, you know, I had this very isolated, different type of mindset, and then have since returned to being, you know, much of who I was the earlier part of my life, plus of course the added perspective of everything I went through. But when I lost my sense of, like, you know, I don't know, I don't know really how to describe it other than to say, like, I lost myself, I lost my way, and I sat there in a cell being like, how did I become this person? This is like, it like kind of blew my own mind, you know what I mean? Like, and it's like as the mental cloud, kind of like the fog, like went away, and I could see clearly. It's just like there's so obviously 1,000 better ways that I could have, you know, gone through a divorce, or 1,000 better ways that if I wanted to be, you know, close with my family, or if I felt that burning of a father who felt, you know, I think I can talk about, vaguely speaking, you know, any father who loses his children, there's a burning feeling of just like, you know, I'll do anything to fix this or to make this right or to maintain this relationship, you know. But just because you feel like you would be willing to do anything to maintain what matters to you the most in the world doesn't mean that you should, or those are your best options. And it's so clearly sitting there thinking in a cell, like, wow, I could have handled this 1,000 different ways. And like the fact that in my mindset, I thought at the time this was the best way to handle the situation, like it blew my own mind. It's like, how did I even think that? Like, and it just was shocking, you know? And there's really no defense or no way to take away what I did, other than that, you know, thankfully there was actually no true physical harm of any kind, you know? And I think that, and knowing that I'm relatively young, I have the rest of my life to demonstrate to myself beyond other people, you know, that is a very isolated, dark thought process in my life. And if that is an isolated, dark thought process over the course of 30, 40, 50 years, you'll see that. But I can't prove that to anybody, you know, coming out of prison, be like, hey guys, I'm changed, I'm good, you know, like, yes. You know, they have to say, hey, here's who you were for 32 years. Here's this dark period of your life, and here's who you are for the next 20. I have at least 20 years till most people in this world are willing to be like, you know what, maybe he really did change. Maybe incarceration really did, like, in one of those rare instances where incarceration actually helped an individual, you know. Yeah. Maybe I'm one of those rare cases, you know, but I have 20 years to prove that. And so I'm not in a rush other than to be myself and let people see that slowly over time. And yeah, I mean, I hate talking about it in any kind of contextual way, because I feel like it might come across like I'm giving excuses. I'm not. I'm just telling people the context under which these things happened. That's it.